part of the reason, or maybe even the whole reason, why man fell with Adam and Eve is because they practiced a bad marriage. So it shows that even in the start of the Bible, God was showing us why a bad marriage is obviously very severe and how we should practice a good marriage. So, firstly, we need to understand that God only told Adam about the forbidden fruit, because when he tells him in chapter 2, verse 16 to 17, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat from it you will surely die. That was before Eve was even created, so it was impossible for God to tell Eve because she wasn't even created. So we have to assume that Adam told Eve about the wisdom God told Adam, if you know what I mean. And obviously it said, in chapter 3, verse 2 to 3, it talks about, and the woman said to the serpent, where you may eat of the fruit from the trees of the garden, but from the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you will not eat of it, nor will you touch it, or else you will die. So obviously we have to assume that Adam told Eve about the forbidden fruit. God told Adam, Adam told Eve, and that is where the first mistake kind of is. Because she didn't listen, she had to submit to Adam's wisdom from God. So she was tricked by the serpent, She should have listened to Adam's word over the serpent's word, but she didn't, She didn't truly submit to his word, because if she did, she would have listened to Adam's word, which was from God, over the serpent. And I think it's interesting how the serpent tricked the woman and not the man. He chose the woman to trick and not the man. And obviously Adam was wrong, as he didn't stop Eve from eating the fruit and keeping her in check. As as a man you should, you're the leader, and you obviously shouldn't lead your woman to the devil. You need to lead her to God and cleanse her with the word, as it says, which he obviously didn't do. He just let her eat the fruit, and he let her be tricked, by the serpent. So he was a bad man there. You can see in Genesis 3:6 that he was with her, because it says, and she gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So Adam was there, but he didn't step in, which he should have done. That's what God says, we must lead as a man, but he didn't. So what we get from all of that is Eve didn't submit, okay, and Adam didn't lead, which is not according to God's will and the God's way of marriage, so they messed up there. So a bad marriage between these two, because they didn't take their roles well enough, led to the fall of man. And even in that, what I get from it, from chapter 3 verse 6 of Genesis, is that she was the leader in that moment. Adam submitted to her. Again, he shouldn't have submitted to what she was doing and allow her to give him the fruit and what he ate. Instead he should have rejected it and told her, no, God told us not to eat of the fruit, and he should have led her back to God, but he didn't. And all of that is what led to the fall of man, at least part of it, which is a bad marriage. And as I put here in my notes, marriage is very important, so keep God at the center always, and don't allow the serpent to get to any of you, because when God isn't at the center, the serpent slips in, and that is what happened. Exactly. And I will add as well to the end, 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 5, Paul says, do not deprive one another except with consent for a time, that you may give yourself to fasting and prayer. Then come together again, so that Satan does not tempt you for lack of self-control. I think that's just useful to add. Don't separate for too long in your marriage, because obviously if you do for too long, that is when the devil can start tempting you and try and separate you. So remember, that marriage is one. You become one with your partner. And I know I'm just a 21-year-old talking about all this stuff, but I'm using the Bible, okay? Not my experience, the Bible. Hopefully you can understand what I'm talking about.